It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in House Report 109-530. For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana rise?
To discuss my amendment.
The gentleman is recognized. Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 2, printed in House Report Number 109-530, offered by Mr. Burton of Indiana.
Pursuant to the House Resolution 891, the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Burton, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Indiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
I withdraw.
Gentleman from Oregon.
I'm seek time in opposition to the amendment.
Gentleman will control 5 minutes. Gentleman from Indiana.
Congressman Stark and I both realized a problem that exists in the redrawing of the floodplain maps across this country. FEMA is in the process of reshooting the maps in several parts of the country, and the only way people who are in the affected areas know about it is in the classified section of the newspaper, there's some very fine print that says that there's going to be a meeting discussing the elevations of the new floodplains. And we had about 300 or 400 people in my district that didn't know anything about this until after the fact. Now, the problem is once FEMA has redrawn these maps and they have been approved, the only way a person in a projected floodplain knows about it is if the insurance company contacts them and says you have 45 days to buy insurance or else we'll add it to your mortgage payment. And we had about 300 people in moderate income areas that were going to be hit with an extra $1,000 or $2,000 a year for flood insurance when there hadn't been a flood there for over 100 or 150 years. In fact, nobody ever heard of having a flood in this area, and yet these people had been adversely affected. And once these maps have been drawn and approved, the only way a person in a newly affected area can have restitution is to go and spend maybe $1,000 or $2,000 hiring a lawyer and then fighting the governmental process, the agency, to prove that they're not in a floodplain. What my bill does and Mr. Stark's bill does simply is says that FEMA has to send a first-class letter to everybody in the affected areas so they know there's going to be a meeting talking about them being in a newly designated floodplain. It'll cost about 35 to 40 cents a letter, maybe even less than that if they'd use bulk mail. In this particular case, the 300 families in the affected area, it would have cost $120 to notify them that there was a change in their status. There had not been a flood there in anybody's recollection, at least not well over 100, 150 years. And so I think this is a very important amendment. It helps people all across the country, and I really appreciate the chairman of the committee saying and the ranking member saying they would approve and approve this amendment. So I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member, and I yield to my colleague, Mr. Stark.
I thank the distinguished gentleman from Indiana for yielding, and I would like to associate myself with his remarks. In my community, this came to my attention several years back when 3,000 or 4,000 households in 2 different cities received notification just 45 days before the insurance bill was due from their mortgage companies, and were told that within 45 days they'd have to pay between $1,000 and $2,000 in insurance. In both communities, half of the households were excluded, but each household had to go individually, perhaps at a cost of $1,000 to $2,000 a household. That was $1 million to $2 million without even hiring lawyers or surveyors in my district to relieve themselves from this onerous, unneeded insurance premium. We could send 1 million letters for less than $400,000 if that became necessary. It's a question of timely notification. I think it's only fair for us to the individual property owners to give them time to be able to get the surveys and get the information they needed before they have to pay up the first $1,000 or $2,000 in premium and then later try and escape from under this if their property is excludable from the floodplain. And I urge the adoption of the amendment. Thank the gentleman for yielding.
Once again,
The gentleman yields back to balance his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Indiana. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is adopted.